Hi, this is John from Uproll. This is the Ken demo for the no-code plugin on bubble.io. Basically, what we're going to do today is just run through how to get set up, how to create a wallet, and just some best practices mixed in. Hopefully this video will be somewhere under an hour, but we may we may get carried away. But first, we're just going to go over the basics. So if you landed on this demo video, you likely started here at thekinplugin.com. Just a little bit of overview is the Kin plugin basically allows non-developers to create applications without really using any code whatsoever. So it's pretty powerful. You just have all you have to do is really sign up for bubble.io, install the plugin, and then configure a few things, and then you can start building out whatever sort of wallet and application that you want. Bubble itself is super powerful, so it's 100% free to get started. There's hundreds of templates to choose from. You can build everything from an Uber clone to a Shopify clone to CRM tools, whatever it is. And there's tons of integrations to it. And pretty much there's just endless possibilities. So if you haven't yet, I would check out the guide that we have in place. And this is kind of where we can start because it has kind of the basic setting up steps here. We're going to run through this, and then we're going to run through just the how-to guide so you can see firsthand exactly what it takes to build everything. I know that reading a lot of this just may be too cumbersome. So yeah, let's get started. First things first, we want to create an account on Bubble. So you're going to go to bubble.io. And once again, this is just a no-code platform, and we're going to be able to dig into this for a little bit. But come up here and hit get started. What we're going to do is put in our email address here and just pick a password. Review the terms, and then you can go ahead and skip that. And we're in. Super easy. The next thing we want to do, if you go back here and look, is just create your first Bubble app. So all you got to do is just go here and click create, and we're just going to pick a name. So Kin Demo 2. Unfortunately, you have to kind of go through all this. So I'm just going to say this is building blocks. Is it customer facing or internal, external? What's our goal for this application? Let's just say testing on a business idea. None of these things actually matter. It's just for Bubble's internal purposes and data analytics. The new app name though does have to be unique. It'll look like that in your dashboard. It's going to control what your URL looks like until you add your own personal URL, but that's pretty much it. So from here, you just hit create a new app. And that's actually it. Yes, we definitely want to know our location. So you'll see this application assistant pop up here. I strongly recommend if you are new to Bubble that you check this out along with, we have a bunch of resources down here about if you're new to Bubble, like the manual, which is good when you're looking for specific questions. Bubble Lessons is a great place for you to start out though, just to get the basic idea of how things work. Once you're a little more advanced, you can move on to the Bubble templates. So it's pre-made apps. They have everything in there you could possibly imagine. Forums. So if you're stuck on something in particular, there's a really great forum that you can ask tons of questions on. I've been asking questions on there for years, and it's simply fantastic. There's a boot camp. So if you want to get up to speed really quickly on no code, you can do that. And then there's just this great YouTube channel that I wanted to add, which is Coaching No Code. So all these are free except for the Bubble Bootcamp, which I still think is affordable. It's a few $100. So definitely worth checking out if you're going to invest the time. Anyways, back to the application. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we land on this index page here. And this is just like the boilerplate page that they have, and it kind of shows you what buttons look like and et cetera, et cetera. What we're viewing here is the design tab. And basically this is what the front of your website or app looks like. So when a user actually goes to this on your live site, it looks like that. So like we have the ability to go in here and say, delete this get started button. And when we hit preview again, we'll see that it's gone. So you kind of get the general gist of it. There's also a workflows tab. So this is just, actions that we take. So if like you click a button, what's going to happen, what sort of actions that, and we're going to go over a bunch of this, but that's kind of where that lives. Data types. So I definitely watched this video. It's just on getting started with bubble data. So you have the ability to create various data types, which are just kind of like tables that save and you're able to pull from later on. So the required one that they have is user. So when a user signs up, it'll have their email. They'll have kind of just modified and created date and something called a slug. You'll see here that there's no password because it's completely not saved anywhere on the database where Bubble developers have access to it. So if I wanted to create, let's say, a wallet data type, that'd be a good place to start. And let's say I just wanted to have a public key. I would just add this field and make it a text field. And now, if I create a wallet, it'll have the option for me to insert a public key underneath it. I'm gonna say I just want balance too. So before I pick the text field, you can also see that there's just a ton of them: number, numeric range, date range, yes, no. And you also have objects, so you can actually pick, say, user of the sort. So a lot of these will come into play the more familiar you are with Bubble, but today we're just going to create balance, and we're going to make sure that that's a number. And that's pretty much it that we need to go over at this point with data. Styles, once you get more into this, you can worry about that. Settings, once again, we'll dig into this. And logs. Logs is basically where you can see everything kind of going on the back end of your app. The great thing about the Bubble Kin plugin is that you won't see a lot of the stuff here, any sort of sensitive data, which is very good. Okay. So the next step is going to be actually adding the no-code plugin and installing the Kin SDK. Typically in a coding environment, it's a lot of legwork for you to do that. It could take developers anywhere from a few hours to a few days to integrate to integrate Kin within their app. Here, we're going to do it just by hitting Add Plugins, searching Kin Wallet, and pressing Install. And that is literally it. So you'll see down here just actions and elements, and we're going to dig into that. Before we do that, though, off Bubble, there's important things that we have to do. One of them is register with the Kin portal. So right now it's down, which may be an issue, but basically you're going to register on the Kin portal. You're going to add your app to it. It's going to issue an app index. And then from there, you're going to actually go to Discord. So in the documentation, there's the Discord link, but if we go here and we open up Discord, what you're going to do is go to the Kin developer community, and you'll see right under here in dev portal support, and you'll actually see that the portal is down and they know about it right now. So once you come here, you'll see that people will actually request to update their app. So like here's Prog Frosty who says, please activate our app index 402. And as you can see here, that they have updated it. We'll get to that later. Just something important that needs to be done. All right, back to the demo. So I like to start with a blank page when building. So I strongly suggest you do the same. So we'll just call this wallet. And just like that, there's a new page on your app. And you can actually go and see it live. You'll see that appear the URL is replaced with wallet and it's blank because it is blank. So the first thing that we're going to do is create an account with Kin. And if you come back to this plugin, you'll see something you'll see something called elements and actions. There's kind of an interplay between these. There's also something called events and data events, but those aren't relevant for this plugin. But there is some interplay between these where sometimes to do an action, we need to have an element on the page. So if we look under here, we can see there is a create account action, which is what we want to do. In order to do that, the first thing we have to do is come up here and you'll see that I typed in just wallet and something wallet input comes up. All you're going to do is just go like this and drag it onto your page. And it's totally fine that sits there and then it's visible. You won't really be able to see it on the page itself. There's kind of nothing to suggest that. But what we will do though is to create an account is that there has to be some sort of trigger. So sometimes you can create an account on the back end, like after a user signs up. It could be part of the workflow. We're going to keep it just real simple and just have a button that creates an account for a user. So here is our create account button. I'm just going to put this right up in this corner. So I can change the text on it really easily. And for another thing you can do is just come in here, click style, change the color, change the font. So, I mean, there really is an endless amount you could do with Bubble. I could change obviously the size, and I can change just the roundness of the buttons as well. So now it's going to look different up here, and you'll see that it'll kind of tell you where the position is of it, and you can move it around with your arrows or you can drag it with your mouse. It doesn't really matter, but you will see it show up here. So this is the front end, this is design. We have the button in place. How do we trigger and actually create an account? All we have to do is just click Start Edit Workflow, and you'll see this sort of trigger box appear. And it says when button create account is clicked. So basically when somebody comes over here and clicks this button, we want some sort of action to take place. And that's what this is for. So these are going to be the workflow steps. This is super easy. All you got to do is type create account. And this is an action that was added from this plugin right here, create account. And you'll get this box up here and it'll say, what's the app index and an option for test. You want this app index to be your own app index to your app. This is how you're going to get credit for the KRE. And it's just really for tracking purposes. And it's purely part of the incentivization model for using Kin as a developer. Now, test has to do with whether or not you're on mainnet or testnet. On testnet, none of the money is real. It's not really happening on the blockchain. It's just for testing purposes. So you can do like airdrops and you can send stuff, but you'll never be able to send actual kin to it. It's completely just for testing. So if you want to be in production, which is the actual live blockchain, you want to make sure that this is no. If you want it to be in the test environment, just click yes, and then you'll create a account that's just for testing. So let's go ahead and just click no. So we're going to create that. And then the actual next step that we're going to do is updating this wallet input. And all you have to do is just add it, and all the code on the back end just takes care of it right away. So we're going to create an account, and we are going to update it. And you're going to notice something here is that I will click this, and we'll see if we're actually able to create it. Solana has been running incredibly slow, so your success rate on creating an account it could really range in a day from a 10% success rate to a 90% success rate. So here we failed, but as you can tell, like we kind of don't even have insight. We don't even know if a wallet's created as a user, because this is what your user is going to see when they land on your page. So one way to make it more obvious is by allowing them to actually see what's going on and see if they have a wallet created. And the main functions of a wallet are its keys, its public key and its private key. So how do we sort of display that data? Luckily, we built in a way for you to reveal and hide private keys just pretty easily. What we need over here is we need to go back to elements and pick an element to show those keys. So the best one to do is actually input. And all you got to do is just take this and drag it to here. So let's call this one public key. So when there's no value in here, the placeholder will show up. Just say public key. And we want to make sure that the content format is text. We'll go into how we can hide these more effectively. But in the initial content, what we want is we want to go to wallet input A. And we just want to choose public key. And one of the coolest things with Bubble is that we can just copy this and then paste it like that. And we can go, hey, let's just get the private key out there too. So now we'll know when somebody clicks this create account button, it's going to create this account with this app index and in this environment. And it's going to update this element wallet input A. And on the front end, in these two inputs right here, the initial content, basically when there's something that's in that local storage, in that wallet input, when there's a public key that's in one of those fields, the initial content means that it's going to show up here. And same with private key. So let's give it a shot. So you'll see up here the status bar. This is just the Bubble plugin trying to communicate with the blockchain. If you always want to check out what's going on the blockchain, you can go to status.solana.com. And down here, you're going to see something called TPS. And this, I think, is really optimistic. in terms of how they're measuring their TPS, but typically you want it above 2,000. Typically I see that it's about 1,000 less than whatever they're saying. So if you dip below 2,000 on here, you're going to run into a good amount of trouble. TPS is transactions per second. Basically, it's just like how much traffic is there occurring on the site. Let's go and just reload the page. The nice thing is when you have private keys, public keys, whatever it may be, as long as the user doesn't clear their cache or their cookies, it's going to be saved there. So you could always refresh, you could close the page, you could come back. One good thing to do is you can see here kind of like it times out, there's an error. One way to kind of avoid this and speed things up is if you add just another, so you'll see that again, is you'll add another event and you say an unhandled error has occurred. And when that happens, what we just saw, this sort of box right here was an unhandled event. What we want to do is let the user know what's going on. So one way to do that is to drag and drop an alert. So this is alert A, and all you got to do is hit position at the top. And what's going to happen back here is that when an unhandled error occurs, I'm going to show this alert, and I'm going to say Solana is running slow. Retry. And what we'll see over here look at that. We were able to create the wallet successfully, so we're not going to see that error. Okay, so you can see here we have the public key and we got the private key. That's pretty cool, but a lot of the time you don't even want this to be shown on the screen as it is. And the cool thing is too is that it's never shown back here. So once again, these are the logs, and if you go here, just click everything, and what you can do is you can see all the things that are happening on the database server on your Bubble app. And we're running search and nothing's coming up. So what that means is that we were able to create a wallet on the front end, and we were able to save this data, so I'm able to refresh it. Oh yeah, by the way, when page loads, so you can avoid what just happened to me, is that all you have to do is just hit update a wallet input, and it'll show back up anytime the page loads. So it's kind of like this container over here. You have to tell it to update it and push it out. But you'll see on the logs that nothing's showing up here, even though you created something over here. So that's good from a security standpoint, because that means that nobody can access these private keys under almost any circumstance, unless they have access to this device itself. Once again, though, we want to be able to hide that. So what we're going to do is a little more complicated. And if you came to this video because you were stuck on the reveal hide private key step, it's good that we're getting this out of the way now. So once again, we have a button, and we're going to try to accomplish the following. We want to be able to have the keys hidden at first, and we want to be able to show them, and then we want to be able to hide them again. So why don't we go ahead and just name this button Reveal. The best way to do this is to use something called states, and a state is best shown rather than explained. So what I'm going to do first is click all three of these elements and click group elements in a group. And what you'll see over here now is that this key, and this button are all under this thing called group A. And group A is really great. There's tons of things you can do with groups. You can determine its type of content and where it's pulling data from, and tons of complicated stuff that I'm going to leave up to you in the boot camp and all the other lessons to get to. But one of the advantages is that it allows us to create states and conditions. So what I want to do when I hit this reveal button is I want to set a state that reveals the keys. And to do that, we need to create a state. So we just type in set state over here, and they'll be like, oh, set state of what? It's like, well, we want to set state of this group. It's like, all right, well, what's the custom state? What do you want to call it? And we're like, well, we'll create a new custom state and call it reveal. And you can see here that you can have a state that, you know, holds a value like a text, like a number, pretty much anything. For this purpose, it's really good to do something binary like yes, no. It's like we're either showing something or we're not. You definitely don't want multiple entries on a yes, no. So just leave that blank. And to be honest, I've never used multiple entries for states before. So we've now created a state, and then this thing called a value added up, which is just another field. And you know, what we want is that we want this reveal state to be on, kind of like a light switch. It's turned on, turned off. So we just turned on, through this workflow, the reveal state. What's a wrinkle in that is that we only want to turn on the reveal state when it's off. So to do that, we're going to go back up here to the trigger box, and we're just going to click on that, and you'll see, all right, button reveal is clicked, and there's this thing down here called only when. What we want is we only want this action to run where it's doing this. We only want this to run when reveal is not turned on. So what we do is we go back to the group where we set the state, and you can see down here now that we have the reveal state, which is the custom state we created. If you don't like state 2, you can always just delete it right there. But we're going to click reveal, and we're going to say is no. So like any light switch, you know, you can only turn it on when it's off, and you can only turn it off when it's on. So we have to do the opposite to hide it. Easiest way to do this is just right click and hit copy, and then hit paste. And look at that, we have 2 the same. But to make it the Bizarro version, all we got to do is change this from no to yes. So now when the reveal state is yes and we're showing the keys, we want to change the state to no to hide the keys. And you would think that that would just do it, but in fact, it's doing nothing as I'm clicking here. And the reason why is that just because this workflow's action and we're setting the state of this, we're not telling the front end what to do with that information. So what we want to do is kind of give directions to these inputs to say like, hey, when this is this, hide this, or when this is that, show that. So the best way to do that is make sure that you don't have the initial content set here, but instead just keep the public key up. And there's this tab called conditional. And basically, as the name suggests, when a condition's true, you can take a certain action, or it'll do something with the element that's currently not being done. So you can do pretty much like when current user is logged in, logged out, you can do just tons of things with this. But what we want to do is we want to go back to where we created that state, which is under group A. And you'll see group A reveal. So when group A's reveal is yes, then we want to set the initial content back to that wallet input and show that public key. Then we just want to do that with the private key. And do wallet input, private key. Now, make sure to come back here and just clear out that expression. And one more thing too, which is just a nice to have, is that when this button shows reveal, it doesn't make sense to say reveal when the keys are already being shown. So what we want to do is when reveal is on, we want to change this text to hide. Let's take a look. All right, as you can see here, public key, private key, nothing being seen until I hit reveal. And then I can hit, as you see here, it says hide. I can go back and I can hit hide. So you can just do that all day. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty safe way of doing things. You can see here though, that I can just do like this and just delete that and delete that. This is what happens when the input is not disabled for something that's just for display purposes. So if you come back here, you'll see under appearance that you have all these sort of options, like limit the number of characters, prevent enter from submitting. This input should not be empty. There's one that's this input is disabled. You want to click that, and you want to click that for private key as well. But don't worry if you forget to do this, because it won't delete the actual data that's being stored. It's just purely cosmetic, but it's just good to have as a practice. Okay, we have created an account. We have shown how to reveal and hide keys. What we probably want to do first is get some money. So first we got to figure out how much that we have, right? So we need to check our balance. And that is one of the easier things to do, but let's just say get balance. Once again, put a button on here and we can trigger an action, but where are we going to put it exactly? Well, we're going to put it back into an input, just like we did with the public key and the private key, right? But if you remember, this public key, it's pulling its info from this wallet input A, which is this element here. We got to do something similar with balance, but instead of the wallet input is specifically designed for your public and private key. There's something more general where you can store data, and it's called local storage. You just type storage in here, and you'll be able to pull and drag this element and drop it onto your page. I like to rename it just so I don't get confused. So local storage balance is just obviously a very clear-cut way of doing that. So yeah, let's query the balance. So just like the other step, we're going to create a workflow, and we're going to say get balance. We don't need any conditions for this. Every time we click it, we want to actually get balance. So all you have to do is just type get balance and make sure the app index for you is correct and the test environment is correct. And then what you want to do is you want to push this balance to a local storage. So you'll see that the element already comes up as local storage balance. It's very important that you specify the key, and the keys are hard-coded, so you have to put in last balance like that. So now what it's going to do is that it's going to do its magic on the blockchain. It's going to get the balance of the specified wallet that you've generated, and then it's going to push that to this element on the front, and it's going to look for something called last balance, which is the key. So it's likely going to come up probably as undefined, if at all. Yeah, because we have no money. So let's change that. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to copy the public address. Jump over to Phantom. Hey, look, we have some kin. Yeah, so what we want to do, just hit that, paste our address, and let's give ourselves 1,000. Hit send. As you can see, the blockchain is running super slow, but looks like it just went through. It may take some time for it to show up. Let's see, did we do anything wrong? So typically, that's what happened. Exactly, we forgot, or I forgot to set the initial content. What I want to do is just go to local storage balance, click values, and then all we want is just that last item. Try it again. There we go. Okay, so you can see here it's 1,000. If you want to get rid of the quotation marks, which I would suggest, all you have to do is in this initial content, you'll be able to click more and you could modify it. So I can do find and replace, find this text, and I replace with nothing. And then now you'll be able to see that it's just 1,000. And as nice as it would seem to be able to change the balance from here, you simply cannot. Just kind of stays the same. So you might want to lock that up too. Just disable it. Okay, we have created an account. We have figured out how to reveal or hide the private keys. We have retrieved its balance. We've got a balance. You know, the main thing that wallets do is that they submit payments. So let's do that next. So you're kind of getting the idea of what we need is that we need a couple inputs. So what's the information we need? We need a recipient address. There we go. And we want this content format to be a text. We want to make sure this input is not empty because it's going to be required for the button that we're going to push. So it has to be filled in order for a workflow to go through. All right, and then now just copy paste. Okay, and we need the amount. We want to change that content format, just an integer. And this input should also not be empty. And last, we need another button. Okay. So let's just call this submit payment. So we have the front end sort of figured out. We know where to put the information. We have the action. We just got to create the workflow now. What I'm going to do is come back here and I hit submit payment. So when submit payment is clicked, we want to submit a payment, obviously. So actually, that's what the action's called. Okay, so this is super important, is you want to make sure that your app index is correctly configured, because this is like the bread and butter of the KRE. Test environment again, you'll see amount here. Pretty simple. What you want is you want the input amounts value. The destination, same idea. You want the input recipient addresses value. And then we want transaction type. So if you've been looking at the kin.org documentation, or if you're familiar with the KRE, there's actually 3 different types of transactions that take place. And this kind of goes into their calculations of how much apps get rewarded. So you want to pick a transaction type that is relevant to what you're actually doing. So there's an earn transaction, which is basically when the app owner, like what we're building here, if I had like an owner's address that I'm rewarding my users with, those are going to be earned transactions that are going to send it out. When a user spends money and sends it to me, that's going to be a spend transaction. Third one is P2P. So like when users are just sending to other users. And that's going to be a pretty common one. It's just you as the app owner don't see any of that money. It's just going from, it's not leaving you, it's not coming to you, it's just going between the different users of your app or off app. So all you have to do is define which one you're going to use. And on the back end, we designed it so the memo is generated for you automatically. It does all the proper tracking, blah, blah, blah. So we have put this into submit payment. Pretty simple. What we want to do is we want to show an element. So say that payment goes through. We want to say successful. And as you can see here, we opted for the P2P because we're just going to send the money right back. All right, so how much do we have? 1,000. Okay. So the address that you always want to send to is actually the Solana destination address. So you'll see that kin sometimes has its own like kinx address. You just want the destination owner address. And that's what we create. That's what we show you. So if you're always interacting between you and a user, it's just the address that you're going to be shown right here. So what we're going to do is just paste that in. And let's do 100 and see what happens. All right, it says payment successful. Sometimes that'll happen, and then you'll see that it's just going to continue on, and it may time out. Let's see if it actually went through. So we don't see it here yet. But we do see it here. So that payment just went through. You'll see the times are messed up, and that's just because Solana just got rebooted. So that's an issue. But if we check balance again, nothing yet. Voila. So now you can see our balance is updated to 900. So we were able to successfully submit a payment. You know, this is kind of like the basic stepping stones of any sort of application. So you can submit payments that are attached to workflows. For instance, that says, I want to create a data type. I want to create, like, let's say, an order or something for this person if like this payment's successful. So if it gets to this point, it's just going to be like the fill order, whatever it may be. And then this is something that's generated on your end and blah, blah, blah. And there's sort of infinite use cases you can make around these sort of basic building blocks. And that's what we built Giftery around. That's what we're building all of our apps around. It's just these basic steps that have taken place. Okay, you're going to see here a lot of other actions that are not going to be really of use. So clearing a local storage, deleting a local storage, sending a local storage. Don't really worry about those unless you really want to dig into the weeds and you understand exactly what's going on, especially, and same with clear walled input, blah, blah, blah. What we want to do now is actually get transaction data. And we're going to first show how to get how to check the transaction data and return that value. And then we're going to talk about the actual real world usage, because it gets really complicated really quickly with retrieving activity on the blockchain. So actually we'll do things a little different this time. Instead of displaying data, we're going to input this data and save it to the database. So once again, the action is get transaction data. And this is going to be transaction ID. What we want to do is make sure that this input should not be empty. And we want to do what? We want to get transaction data. What we got to do is that. And we want to enter the transaction ID right here, just as value. My suggestion is leave commitment alone, unless you know quite a bit about it. So it's set up right now to make sure that whatever transaction data is being pulled has already been confirmed, and it's pretty much all you need. You're familiar now with AppIndex and test environment and what you need and when. Okay, so if we pull this transaction data and we do nothing else, so let's see. Here's this transaction data here. And this is on the blockchain. What we're doing is we're taking this right here. This is the actual transaction ID. So if we do this and nothing else, it may work, it may not. There's no way of knowing unless we do something with that data. Also, FYI, when you're running inversion test, which is basically like we haven't deployed anything, we haven't made this app live, it's testing, it's going to run slower. So when you actually have a live app, which is just hitting deploy, which we'll go over in a second, you'll be able to see things move a little faster. So as you can see, yeah, we hit the transaction data, nothing there. Let's check the logs. So the nice thing about getting about the transaction data is that unlike the other actions, this one actually runs server side because it doesn't take any sensitive data. So you'll be able to know like when people query transactions, and that's good for purposes of being able to use that transaction data and push it to your server in the back end. So for instance, like right here, because we're doing this on the server, what I can do with that transaction data to make it more visible is I can create a transaction. So we have wallet, we have order, which is just kind of whatever. But let's say we want to hold transactions for a user. What I can do is I can say, okay, what was the amount of that transaction? And I can actually go result to step 1, and I can get transaction data. And I got to show you in another app how to do this because it's stupidly complicated at this point. So here's the liven of the Kin wallet, which, by the way, has all the best practices. It's definitely something that you can emulate and be sure is safe and has the best things in mind. So I strongly suggest that you jump back here and you look just at these workflows. You go through it. You can actually request a copy of it on the front end. So if you go to kinwallet.com, you can actually send a request out and we'll send it to you, and you can kind of run through, and all you have to do is just change out the app index and webhooks. Okay. So over here, when we did the, let's see, one thing that's really cool is you can search here for your workflows. Okay. So we get transaction data here. And this is kind of where things get really complicated because we're getting the raw transaction data. So if we just did this, I'll be able to show you what the raw aspect looks like. Okay, so we hit the get transaction data. It ran this workflow. It went out, it received it, and it created a new transaction data type, which we can go and see in the data tab. We can go to app data, and we can go to all transactions. We can see here, it didn't even retrieve it. So something's going wrong, but I don't know what yet. But what I do know is that if I copy this, and basically what we did here is that we took the raw data. Oh, I know what went wrong here. Sorry, I know this is all over the place. It's not the transaction data you're doing, it's actually the TXID, which holds the raw data that we will be messing with. Hit that, run it again, go to data, refresh that. Ah, there it is. So you can see here, it's a few different things. And we'll just copy paste this so we can take a better look at it. So you can see up here, it's TX status, success, and then it comes into this thing called a payments array where it says, this is where the destination is like who received the money. This is how much it is in quarks. So you have to divide this because it's giving you it's basically, imagine like it's giving you it in pennies, but the Ken version of it. So you have to divide it. And then this is the sender address. And you can see over here actually that what type of transaction it is. Also, that being said, if you ever do have a question whether or not a transaction is valid for the KRE, all you have to do is go to laboratory.kin.org, go over to transaction, and then I'm just going to paste that. I'm going to copy this transaction again that we sent. I'm going to paste that into here. And we have a valid kin transaction with a valid memo attached. We didn't transfer any SOL because it's subsidized, and it was a transfer of a token, and that token was kin. So you can see here the amount, the authority, the destination, blah, blah, blah. But down here is really important. This is what you want to check. Make sure the app index is correct for you. Make sure that the transaction type is correct. So if you remember, we did P2P, and this is our app index. So everything's looking good, but this is a great place for you to test out all the different transaction types. Make sure you're getting everything correct. Okay, back to here though. What we want to do is pull out each of these individually. And I'm just going to be honest with you, the easiest way for you to do this is just jump into the live version and just hit copy expression. And then what you're going to do in the editor is paste that expression. These can get a little tricky, not gonna lie. You know what? An easier way as well is just okay. Now I'm running into trouble. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, I guess we're doing it the old-fashioned way, which is when we get this transaction data, we want to create a new transaction, and we want to find the amount. Given how it's coming in right now, we want to pull this result from step 1. We want the TX ID. Now we want to do a series of find and replace. Basically what we're doing is we're finding things that we don't want and we're replacing it with nothing. So you'll see over here, if you go ahead and click here, it'll be like find and replace, and it'll be like, replace that. Easy. Do it again. And likely, hopefully by the time that you guys are seeing this, we'll have perfected this and just made it a little easier. Find and replace again. If anybody is good with reject patterns, definitely hit me up, and I'll just put something in this video to make it faster with one very complex formula. Okay. And replace again. What are we on? Just did that. Replace again. Basically, once again, all we're doing is removing the characters right now that we don't want. And this is definitely the dumb way to do it, but so are we. So am I, at least. Okay, next what we want to do is something called split by. Basically, we want to separate all these things by a comma. And then that allows us to kind of like number things out and say like, oh, we want the first thing before any comma, or we want the second item, or we want the third item, blah, blah, blah. And in this one, we want, in the amount, we want item 7. So we just type in item, and you can actually pick from the list, do item 7. And then if you remember, this is giving it to us in quarks. So what do we need to do? First, we need to take this complexity and convert it to number. And then we need to divide it by a large number That is 100,000. Okay, definitely not easy. So thanks for bearing with me. Let's get that transaction ID again. And let's look it up. And let's see if it came through. Look at that. The amount is 0. So probably still doing something wrong. Let's take a look. Just making sure I have the right amount here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're missing 1. Okay. Let's see if we can just try to copy it again. Nope. All right. We're just going to have to update this with an addendum guide to hopefully just a simpler way to do this. But basically, when you get this raw data right here, what we want to do, right, is we want to remove this. So this is gone. This is kind of the idea. And we're removing that, so that's gone. And we're removing that, so that's gone. And we're removing that. And we're removing that. 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 And that. And then what we're doing is we're inserting commas here. And here, blah, 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 here, you kind of get the idea. So it'd be like, this is item number 1, item number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's make sure that was item. Also, if you get into this situation, you typically hit Control Z. Sometimes it'll come back up. But I digress. What we want to do now is we'll run it through and kind of look at the completed product. But these are the basic sort of building blocks of what you need. Getting transaction data first requires us to get that ID. And we're going to talk about this just more in depth right now because all this stuff is generally straightforward, but getting transaction data is definitely a little more difficult because in any wallet that's created with the Bubble plugin is a non-custodial wallet. That is generally a very good thing because you don't store the private keys on your server. They don't see your private server unless you're actively like harvesting them and pulling them, which you should not do under any circumstance. But yes, the drawback to that though is that because you can't really see these wallets and you can't see when a payment is being submitted, you don't really have good insight in terms of what's going on. So that is generally just a huge issue. So the way that we actually understand like, hey, a payment was submitted and we're getting that data back is with something you probably have heard of by now, which is called just the Agora Web Hooks. So imagine Agora as kind of like it's this layer between your app, which is what we have here, and the Kin blockchain. It's kind of like FedEx, where it's just taking packages and it's moving them back and forth. So you send a message to the blockchain, and it's like to submit a payment. What we're trying to do with webhooks is create basically a mailbox on your backend and allowing the blockchain to send messages back. And Agora is going to deliver that because it's FedEx and you have the mailbox set up. So this is definitely one of the more sophisticated things that needs to be done if you need to have insight into how your users are spending money. This is really important when it comes to, like, say, the spend transaction type. So if they're buying something from you, you need to understand exactly when somebody's actually making that purchase and when that purchase is successful. So let's see if the portal's back up. And it's not. Okay. I'll add an addendum video for that as well. But basically, what we want to do is create webhooks. So we want to create that mailbox, and we create it on our Bubble backend. At this point, most of you probably do not have the backend configured, which is totally fine. We're going to do that right now. So in your Bubble app, just to allow yourself to receive webhooks, you need to go to Settings. Then you need to go to API. And right here, you want to make sure that this is checked off because that's going to enable the workflow API and backend workflows. And as you become more and more sophisticated with Bubble, that's going to be something you're going to do all the time is work in backend workflows. Be very precarious or very worried about using the data API. I've never really had a need for it. I would definitely say that's for advanced users. Make sure that's not on. So what we want to do is go to the backend to create that webhook. So you click up here, and we've been on the index page. And I know I jumped over to the newer app, the newer version, but all the same stuff nonetheless. You'll see over here, you have all your pages, but you also have something called backend workflows now, which probably wasn't appearing before. You just want to click on that. And you'll come to this page. Unlike mine, it's going to be blank. So it's going to look, let's just say, blank folder, right? It's going to look more like this. And we need to create your mailbox, essentially, and we need to configure its address so that everybody knows where to send you transaction and event data. So here, we're going to click on something called New API Workflow. Okay, let's name this Events. And you'll see here that it says Expose as a public API workflow. Typically, you don't want this on unless you're allowing other apps to come in and message you, which is what we're doing with Agora. So in this case, you want it on. In most cases, you don't. Same with this workflow can be run without authentication. What that means is that this workflow can only run, like these actions that we're going to build, can only happen if the user is signed in to our account, into our app. That's not the case here. So we want to be able to run it without authentication. And then ignore privacy rules when running the workflow. Generally on the back end, when you're dealing with, let's say, non-public APIs that require authentication, you've built them in a way where, especially if you have strict privacy rules, you will want to ignore them. With all three of these checked, though, you want to be just very, very vigilant in terms of security. Definitely reach out to just the Uproll team if you have more questions about that. There's a ton of information in the Kin plugin resources about security, privacy guides, all that. Definitely more for the advanced use cases. Okay, so this is the first step to creating your own mailbox. You'll see here something called parameter definition. What we want to do actually is change that from a manual definition to detect request data. And you'll see that this thing called include headers in the detected data. So we want to check that as well, and we'll go into why. So what this means is that it's going to be open to taking in data, but it doesn't know what exactly it's going to look like yet. So we need to do something called initialize this webhook. So what you want to do is click that. And you're going to see this right here. And this is actually not your final mailbox address, but it's the first one to activate your mailbox address. So what I want to do, right, is I want to receive mail here, or I want to receive actions to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click this and copy it. And typically what you do to activate this is you would go into your portal, you would select the app that you've created, you would navigate to the prod environment, into webhooks, go to the prod environment, and then you would put this in and press update. Make sure that you've configured a webhook secret, and I'll do a separate video on all this anyways, but make sure you put in a webhook secret, press update, and then jump onto Discord back over here and let them know that you have updated your webhooks. And Richard will get back to you, or B-Man will get back to you, and they'll say that, yep, we've updated them for you. So when they do that, what you would want to do is actually send a payment from your app. So here's the Kinwald app. What we want to do is just send a payment to somebody to hit the Agora layer. It hits the blockchain. Blockchain sends the message back. And then since your webhooks or your mailbox is now ready to accept something, it's going to send that data back to here. What we're going to do right now, though, is that we're just going to pretend like we're Agora and activate this webhook. So this is just for informational purposes. What you're really going to want to do is just send a payment, and the payment's going to mimic, or the payment's going to do this action. We're just mimicking it. Okay. So from Agora's backend, it's going to post to your mailbox. It's going to send something that looks like this, right? So when that comes in, voila. You will see here this massive change. And basically it knows now what's going to be coming down the pipeline. So like after you've got this, it has like all this data, like the transaction, the TX hash, the TX ID, the invoice list, like all this information. What you want to do is you actually want to hit save. And that's the first part of it, right? So now your mailbox is 100% activated. The annoying thing though is that you have to change your address back because you're no longer initializing it. So you'll see here, right? It says initialize. We're no longer initializing it. So we want that. And also we want this to work in our live app. So we want to remove the part that says version test. And if you look at the documentation in the webhook section, it goes over this in detail. So definitely check it out. So what we want to do now is we want to take this updated version of this URL, which once again, we're just removing version test in the initialize. You want to copy it, and then you want to repaste it into your portal, your dev portal, and you want to update it, and then you want to come back here, and you want to let them know again that you have updated the webhooks, and then they will update it, and then your mailbox is 100% set up. Awesome. The next wrinkle in this scenario is that the data you're receiving is encoded. And this, if you go and you look at the plugin history, you'll see that we went through like 25 iterations of trying to figure out how to decode it properly in Bubble. We got it, so it's actually super easy to do now. All you got to do is type decode here as an action, put in decode webhook. What you want to do is you want to put in the request data body. You want to go to the last item. You want to click TXID. And that's going to decode all this data that's already kind of going crazy. So you can actually see that here. Yeah, body, last item, transaction event, TXID. And you'll see here that what we do with this is that we take those steps and we pull that TXID and we save it to a database. And then at that point, finally, we query, because we just decoded it and we just saved it, we're now checking it. So we check that transaction ID, leave the commitment blank, fill in your app index, do the test environment. And now you have sent a payment to Agora. Agora has fulfilled it on the blockchain. The blockchain has told Agora that it's fulfilled. Agora has sent you a webhook. You have set up your mailbox to receive these webhooks. You have decoded the transaction ID. You have saved it to your database. And then now you're checking it. And all you have to do is do result from step one, so from the decoding, and then do TXID. So you don't need this step, but it is a good thing to save. So when that happens, it'll go out and it'll actually check how it went. And it'll run this, say, get transaction ID. And from here, you can say like, okay, this is where the complication comes in with all these different amount, destination, origin, wallet. So beyond this, which we will tie into with just supporting documentation, you may want to attach this transaction to an existing wallet or an existing user. All you have to do to make that happen is just search for it and route to it. So here we're looking for a wallet with the public key that is present in this transaction data. And when we do that, the system's able to go through, search all the wallets, find the one with the right proper key, and then create this transaction and then attach it to this wallet. And we can look whether or not it's successful, and we can make changes to it. We can see if it's non-successful, and then we can add that transaction to the wallet itself. I know this part has gotten just super complicated, so thank you for bearing with me. Webhooks are it's definitely a work in progress. You'll see here that when we actually create webhooks itself, we pull in this thing called Agora HMAC SHA-256 from the header. In a later session, we're going to talk about how we verify this webhook comes from the right place by using this data. But that's definitely something for another time. But it is very important, so expect a follow-up soon. If you do have any questions, I'm sure there's going to be a ton. Email us at hello@uproll.app. But that's kind of at least the basic framework of how to build. I know it gets complicated around the GET transaction and webhooks and stuff like that, but this stuff is fairly straightforward. There's lots of supporting documentation. If you go to thekinplugin.com, just click open the guide. A lot of these how-to guides are going to kind of walk through exactly like how you create a wallet, how you reveal private key. The verify completed transaction is going to be a really long one, and that's kind of like what we went over right now, and a random like stream of consciousness. But some of them are easy, like submitting a payment is pretty straightforward. Anyways, thanks for sticking through it. Hit me with your questions. More than happy to help, and hopefully you guys can build some really crazy things with Bubble.